All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Nottingham Planning Board meeting, January 24th, 2018. And I'd like initially to go around the table here and have board members introduce themselves. Buzz, I'll start with you.
Robert Davies, alternate.
Teresa Bascom.
Charlene Anderson.
Edward Beal. Dirk Grotenhuis.
Gary Anderson.
And I'm going to have Robert Davies seated for Sue Mooney. And we have somewhat of a short agenda, but we'll see where it takes us. We're going to go right to the first public meeting, which is the conceptual plan for a duplex. 4 duplexes on Garland Road and Old Turnpike Road. It's map 16 lot 27. And the owner of record is Dan Parent. And I'd like to have the applicant come forward to the table. This is a very informal discussion. There's nothing binding. There's no decisions that are made here. We allow this opportunity just to kind of vet through some of what you would like to do and hopefully provide a little bit of direction on how to make it easier on the applicant.
Absolutely. Did you have copies that you wanted me to?
Yep, the board has copies of what was handed out earlier. Yep, appreciate it. And then if you would just state your name and organization if you're not the applicant.
Yes, my name is Dan Parent. I'm a businessman and I have multiple businesses. Main one is in technology, but are investors in multiple office buildings in the U.S. and Canada. And I was looking at the market for office buildings, and there's a lot already. So being residents of Nottingham since 2008, I saw the opportunity to maybe build some duplexes and keep them and rent them. So not something to buy, to build and then sell, really something that we would maintain ourselves like we do with our other commercial businesses. Scott here helped me out with the high-level conceptual. There's 2 pieces of land in Nottingham, and I spoke to Joanna a couple of times on the phone, the inspector as well, Ross, when I went on site here, and basically I was looking more for guidance as to, is the town of Nottingham open to having duplexes? That's one thing, because some towns don't want them, so that's definitely, I'm in the business of investing and keeping the real estate, so I'm not looking to try to make something that's going to be big. Multi-units with 16 doors is of no interest to me. It's more duplexes, and the reason I went for duplexes is that I saw that it was requiring 4 acres per building. It was easy because you build it like a house, and of course it's easy to scale because you build the first one, and then if all goes well and it rent well, then you go to the second one. If that goes well, you go to the third one. And our kids being in school here, we see a lot of single parent family, so definitely it seemed to me there was a need for this in Nottingham, and not a lot of rentals available in Nottingham for people that want to come here, establish themselves in this nice community. So having been fairly new to residential rental units, because I've done mostly commercial, I want to have a bit of guidance from the planning board as to what would be required. So that's why I put some questions in here, some details, high-level details. Most importantly, there are 2 pieces of land that are identified here, and one of the main questions I had for Scott, and then that's when he said we should talk to you guys, is would we be required to subdivide these pieces of land to put 1 building per lot, basically? That was the main thing, because it's very important for me to make this financially viable. Would we be required to look at this as multi-units? Because again, when we build commercial, it's way more expensive when we get the engineers involved, so this could make the project not viable. So I just wanted to see what the town would require if I want to start with 1 duplex and then adding a second one on the Garland lot, Garland Road lot. That's 20-something acres, so maybe there'd be room for at least 4 And, you know, on the Old Turnpike Road, which is literally 30 seconds from my house, I'm on Sophia Way, so it's 10 acres, so I thought there could be room for 2 duplex. But of course, I don't believe that it can be subdividable because they've already been subdivided. So that was my main question to you as to what would be the high-level requirement. And I do understand this is non-binding. It's absolutely what my expectations were as well. It's more guidance.
What's your name, Scott?
My name's Scott Boudreau. I'm the surveyor, Boudreau Land Surveying out of Newmarket.
And could one of you just talk through the plan itself, maybe some of the specifics? I guess I'm a little, could you just back up, there's 2 lots that you're thinking about doing this?
Yes, yep, the one is on Garland Road, that Scott just made a high-level conceptual. That's the first one you see in here as well, and then the second one is on Old Turnpike Road. It's also in here, in the stack of paper. And that one is 10 acres. Both of those lots have offers from me on them. And of course, the one on Old Turnpike Road is 10 acres. And there's already a building envelope that was identified by a survey that was done, I believe, in 2008 or 9, if I recall.
Where is this 10-acre lot?
10-acre lot is on Route 4, right next to the entrance of Sophia Way.
Okay, so that's the one that was already approved by this board for a,
Single family.
no, it wasn't, it was,
This is commercial lot?
they were gonna put their own road in, and they were gonna put in, not duplex,
Duplexes.
multifamily units.
Yeah.
They were, okay. Because right now it's in an estate, so it's.
Yeah, they never followed through with the development.
I see.
They did some clearing of the land, but they never put the actual road in, and never started the development.
Maybe we're not talking about the same one, because this one has not been cleared at all. So-
Yeah, I don't, this is a,
Oh, you're talking about the further down past the Baptist church towards Revolutionary Lane, I think. Yes, I
Okay,
think you're
this-
right, there was that
That's
one
a
there.
different, that's a different piece. That's why I was asking, because I was trying to determine what this piece
Yeah.
was, because you didn't really put it on an expanded map, so we can see what the location.
Yep, so this one is really at the top of the hill before you start going down. You have the entrance of Sophia Way on that side, right there at the corner.
Okay.
Yep. The one you're talking about, I don't believe is on the market at this point. So Scott, you wanna expand on the Garland, then we can touch on the Old Turnpike Road?
Yep.
Sure. Dan said he wanted to get 4 duplexes on here, so I started with the design, got into it, and just for discussion purposes, put it up front, minimize the road length. And came in Tuesday to drop off these large plans, because they wanted a chance to review them before this meeting. Spoke with Russ. And he had quite a few good suggestions about why not to do it this way, but to possibly change it around, and it made a lot of sense. So I already got some good ideas from him. I just did it this way, just to get a discussion point started. A little parking lot there with 2 parking spaces per unit, with 2 units per duplex, how it goes. I only showed 1 well on here. He informed me that that well would be too small for all 4 units, so either have to expand the well radius, do a larger well if we're gonna do a common well, or maybe do 2 separate wells for 2 buildings, 2 buildings per well. And then create his suggestion was to move everything back where the land opens up. With the 50-foot building setbacks, I wouldn't need to design the road within the setback. I could do it in the building envelope off of Garland Road. Leave future access possibly where the buildings start, and not block that access with this leach field that I'm showing on here, just a subsurface disposal area. 8,000 square feet is what I showed, just to be extra large. Typically, it's 4,000 square feet per dwelling per the state. Just to get it going, I just threw it on there as 8,000 with 1 well, so. Already had some discussion with Russ about that.
So maybe we could bring it back to the board and talk about some larger components of this being, zoning, whether this is gonna be a duplex, multifamily, what are the board's feelings on that? Any?
Well, my question would be either way, and I guess you mentioned when you were talking about what's noted as a drive, but you called it a road. So is your anticipation of putting an accepted road in? Because
No.
of the frontage is what I'm thinking
That
about.
really wasn't the intent. That's kind of what Russ possibly suggested. I was thinking gravel drive, paved drive, just 16 feet wide, just to get into the site, common driveway that everyone's gonna use. He suggested make it leave a 50-foot right-of-way, build the driveway to town specs, paved, and pretty good-sized parking lot so a fire truck can turn around in it.
So when you look at, speaking of driveways, in our ordinances, a driveway can only go to 2 residences.
Okay.
Other than that, it would end up being a road, and then you'd have to have an entrance and an exit.
And do you define residences, a duplex, one building is one and the second one is, so it's 4 doors total?
Yeah,
That's a good question.
it is, because in the zoning, the way they treat duplexes is each unit is kind of treated as its own.
Okay.
For zoning, for, acreage and things like that. So it doesn't necessarily, it wasn't clear on that aspect. I guess my overall thing for both sites, or any site in town, is the zoning ordinance. Obviously, you start familiarizing yourselves with it. Article 2, that section F specifically goes into like the multifamily and duplexes in the requirements, including, where do I say it? The acreage size, the square footage size for buildable area that is required per unit. There's also buffer zones, which you'll want to, basically setbacks. You'll have to be cognizant of that. What else do I have here? And then there's a minimum frontage of 300 feet. So I think the proposed site on 4 may be under that, and the proposed site on Garland may be under that as well. There's some differing numbers depending on where you look. And then for safe access, the Garland site that's showing Route 4 on that, is right on that corner, is about, it's 20 feet to Route 4 from that corner. So being able to have a safe entrance would be a concern for a driveway there too.
Yeah, I think we'd want to see that driveway get pulled away from that intersection. Be more centrally located.
But yes, setbacks, you mentioned the well already, the well location and the number of wells. If you get over, I think it's 25 people per day that you're serving, becomes a public water supply, and then you have a whole different set of requirements with DES. So you may be in a situation where 2 wells may be better if you're doing multiple units. Setbacks from wetlands on both sites, 10A, Route 4 site. Looks like it's got some significant wetlands there, so you have to be, check that to make sure it's feasible for you.
Well, and with the wetlands and stuff, you need to consider runoff. Are you going to be having parking available? You're mentioning 2 per unit, but that, if they have 2 cars, that doesn't allow for any visitors or anything either, so I'm not sure that would even be adequate. But then the more you pave, the more runoff you're gonna have, and the more impervious surfaces. That needs to be a consideration with the wetlands out there.
I guess probably the key thing here is, Ed mentioned, is the frontage. I mean, if there isn't 300 feet, and we can't consider a multifamily, and we can't consider where were we with frontage? Is it 300 for both the duplex and the multifamily?
Yeah. 375 we have for the Garland one over here.
That Garland one, the tax map shows 279, and I think that goes back to two different plans, that, the last two subdivision plans that came in off that.
So if you were gonna proceed with it, you'd need to get a variance through the zoning board.
Yeah.
So that would be, you know, a direction first.
Yep.
Before this board, before you make an application here.
Yeah.
And with a multifamily, I think the appreciation here is that you're not just coming in for, or you wouldn't come in for just one duplex, and then 2 years later come in for another one. This is what we want to see. We always want to see what the full build-out would be, potentially, even if it's phased over the 10, 20 years or whatever. We just want to make sure that the infrastructure per se is adequate for that full development. So having 4 duplexes, I think that we would probably look at it as a multifamily.
Okay.
I'm not, that's not a, again, it's not binding,
Absolutely, I understand.
but with that many units, it just puts in a little bit higher thresholds so that when it is at full build-out, then those are met. That's just, again, it's just opinion.
Yep.
Dirk,
Yeah,
wouldn't it be an alternative to going before the zoning board to build a private road? And that eliminates the question of how many buildings that they can put on it, as long as they've got the frontage on the private road.
it wouldn't be, you would have to make it a town road, right? So in order to have frontage on a town or a state road, 'cause it has to be town or state road for that frontage.
A private road would not suffice for that.
Not anymore, no. At least not with our current regulations.
That's exactly why I brought that up. Is it a drive or a road, accepted road?
Yeah, I mean, if it is an accepted road, then you get the frontage from that built road. But if it's just a private road, then, you know, it's not applicable. I mean, I know we have private roads that have frontages, but.
We just signed a plan for 2 house lots on a private road last week.
Wasn't that an existing road that just was
It was
being
an
named?
existing private road.
That was being named, and it already had the homes on them, though. It was a 911 call.
Wasn't
Is that the
that
one
a
you're talking
variance?
No, I think he's talking about a different one that was on,
The one out by the lake,
Lake. Yeah, that went through ZBA.
the one with 2 great big lots.
Yeah, that had to go through ZBA. So,
Oh, I know which one you're talking about.
We're a volunteer board, so sometimes we need to look up some of our own regulations, so bear with us sometimes.
Under, another thing under the zoning, I mentioned the buffer zone, but just to point you to where it is, it's Article 2, F3 in the lowercase f. There's a 100-foot, if it becomes multifamily development, then there's a 100-foot buffer between any structure and the perimeter of the track. So that basically pushes your setback to 100 feet all around
So that kind of lends to the,
for any structure.
putting it a little bit further back.
Yeah.
What are the chances the town will accept a road like that? 'Cause I know a lot of towns don't like to accept roads anymore.
Oh, we have subdivisions all the time that we're accepting roads. Yeah.
But then it has to be designed to,
Bounce back.
bounce back up.
Well, if it's gonna be a road, then where's the road gonna,
But yeah, road
You want it-
requires the 2.
ingress and egress?
Then the
Yeah, would it be a
engineering-
cul-de-sac road just for access for here, which could be done?
Yeah, those are only, I think those are only currently allowed in zoning through open space historically.
Cul-de-sacs?
Yep, they're specifically allowed for
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I believe the cul-de-sacs currently are only allowed in the subdivision regs for open space, or zoning ordinance for open space developments.
I'm not sure, but,
Oh, this one.
yeah, I did find the citing here. Under the multifamily development frontage, the minimum frontage required shall be 300 feet along a town or state-maintained right-of-way.
Where are you, Dirk?
Zoning, section F, it's page 5, zoning. Section F, multifamily, 3C.
And if you are looking at anything on Route 4, like the Lot 10A, the driveway permit is from the state for those. I haven't seen one not approved yet.
Yeah, if the other parcel would require, which this probably already has one because it's, no, you would have to go to New Hampshire DOT for the driveway permit.
I don't know if they expire. That was subdivided
Yeah, they do expire.
over 10 years ago, I think.
So if we talk about this one, to keep things simple, you know, and not going to multi-unit, this one on Old Turnpike Road, which you have in the packet as well, so this one already has a building envelope of 200 by 200 identified in the back of the land. Would that be considered, I mean, maybe a shared driveway instead of a road to access two buildings? Or do we have to go to multi-units again?
So one of the other requirements of, so Article 2, F3 of the zoning ordinance is a duplex, so it requires minimum 4 acres, which you have,
Yeah.
and 120,000 square feet of buildable area. Contiguous area, I'm sorry. See if it's buildable or contiguous uplands.
Oh, contiguous
that's-
upland buildable soils.
Per building.
Per building. Right. So there's just some area calculations to do, just to see how feasible that is, and I'm sure Scott could do that.
Yeah.
That one may run into a problem because there's a lot of wetlands at the beginning.
On that one, yeah,
that one.
in the front.
Are there a lot of wetlands on the Garland Road one, or is it?
More in the back. In the front part, there's not much, even on top of the hill, there's not a lot. In the backside, there's more, but I didn't plan to go that far, because the whole thing for me is it worth the investment? If I had, 16 houses to put on this, then building a road makes absolute sense, bringing the engineers. If it's just for 4 buildings, it doesn't make sense, none of you would do the same thing. So that's why I switched right away to Old Turnpike Road, which has 10 acres, which has a buildable area, and it's more, do I need to subdivide? With this board here, would be open to say, you don't need to subdivide, but you can put 2 rental units on this? Or do we have to subdivide, which I think the chances are weak that we can subdivide this properly?
Good question, but.
I think there again, I know, I don't know when we get into too much detail for conceptual, but I think you're well under the 300 feet of frontage on that one. I think it's 200 and something. I could be wrong. I'm trying,
230, yeah, I think.
Right now, it's set up for a single house lot.
So that would limit you to 1 duplex instead of more than 1. You could put a duplex there, but you couldn't put 2 without the 300 feet of frontage, unless you got a zoning variance.
you can put a duplex there. A duplex requires 300 feet.
If you got a zoning variance, though.
Oh, if you got zoning, yes, I'm sorry.
So a single-family home the way it is right now, but duplex, you'd have to get a variance for the frontage.
And you could go for the variance for the second duplex at the same time.
Yeah.
Because even if we bring on the Garland lot, if we bring the count down to 2 duplex instead of 4, I still don't have enough frontage on the road to do a duplex, just 1, right?
Right.
I still need to go
Correct.
for a variance.
By zoning, but that doesn't mean that zoning won't give you an exception to do what you want to do.
So I don't know if the lines that they show on the wetlands, if that's the setbacks or not from the, poorly drained, very poorly drained, but
It looks like the building setbacks are from the wetlands.
Yeah.
I didn't do the survey, but
you might just be running into an issue on that one with contiguous square footage.
All right.
So, yeah, the buffers, you know, the 100-foot buffer may again come into play with that Turnpike Road lot as well, making sure that there's 100-foot buffers on them.
yeah, that would really minimize the
And also,
building area.
if it hasn't been done yet, if that driveway was never put in, dredge and fill permit, at least one to cross.
Yeah.
Again, that's DES though.
Yeah, that's a state permit, but.
Yep. I'm just trying to point out things that they can be mindful of.
So other things that,
I think that's,
those are the major hurdles, I think.
so if I find the right piece of land, because obviously I don't have a good,
That's the
I have a good
answer.
one found yet. If I do find the right piece of land with over 400, let's say, of road frontage, the town is favorable to multi-units, or, you know, is there a will to bring multi-units in here, or duplexes in here?
Yeah, we've definitely zoned for them, so,
Okay.
to be prepared to allow them. Obviously, just trying to, making sure that they fit within the sites and.
And you're certainly right that there's a lack of affordable housing in this area.
Yeah, we don't see a lot of duplexes at the board, and we don't see a lot of multifamilies at the board, and so there is probably a need and maybe a demand for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the proposed, or the example project, model looks good.
Yeah, I think what you're representing there, as far as its, building wise and all that looks good.
So assuming we have a right piece of land that allows enough road frontage, would the shared driveway, let's say we keep it at 2, would a shared driveway be enough? Or would we have to build a road per town specs and state specs? Because that has a huge impact on budget, of course.
I don't think it needs to.
Okay.
I mean, it could be that there's a main driveway in,
Yeah.
but if it ever wants to get turned over,
Yeah.
to the town for maintenance purposes or whatever. Because once that road is built and it's on your property, you'll need to maintain it.
Correct.
And when there's, 4 units or potentially 8 units, that's pretty significant for health and safety, just to make sure that there's access in and out of the driveway.
But how many residences can be served by one driveway?
I don't know for sure. I'd have to,
Only 2.
2?
2 driveways.
So that would also require zoning to approve. So there's 3 things that, I would not be scared of the zoning process.
Okay.
The whole idea of zoning is, if you've got a good plan, the whole idea of going to the zoning board is if you've got a good plan that doesn't fit
Yeah.
the zoning parameters, then they're gonna be receptive to helping you get that plan to work. They're not gonna be opposed to it.
Okay.
It's a good plan to start with.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, but that's definitely where you're gonna have to start with this project. If you're gonna do either of these pieces of property,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to start with zoning to see what they'll allow you to do, what the zoning board will allow you to do. Then you come back to us, and once they give us the parameters, then we can go ahead with the approval process.
Okay. And a variance can be asked for the road frontage. Doesn't mean they'll grant it, but it can be asked. Can a variance sometimes be asked as well for the building envelope? Because we talked about, it would be lacking a bit of space, or contiguous space, I think was the word that was used.
Yeah, any dimensional properties of the zoning, so setbacks, building envelopes,
All that,
all of that can be, a variance can be requested.
okay.
And I would say there's probably a few things that would not, that it's not as flexible, and that's in dealing with,
Septic and water.
septic, water, stormwater,
Yes.
wetlands.
Yes.
Some of the critical environmental pieces of it.
Correct.
How far into the design process do you need to go before you can go for a variance for something like that? Can you just do a rough
Yep.
Yes.
conceptual
Yep.
without having to get the stormwater drainage all engineered and
Yep, you don't
everything?
need to do any of that for zoning, unless you're requesting a variance from the stormwater management
Okay.
pieces, but, I think with these type of development, you should be able to make it, work. And we would review that once it came to the planning board, so.
Biggest thing is before you go to the ZBA too, is to make sure that whatever you are asking for a variance on, you have answers as to why it doesn't meet, and then what benefit there is to the town for excusing why you don't meet it.
Okay.
If you can answer that with the ZBA, then it's much easier process for you.
Okay.
And you'll see that if you go for that application, you'll have a checklist to follow. It'll guide you through that.
Yeah, I mean, what you have here in the Garland Road piece, I mean, this would be adequate enough if you put in the setback or whatever the variance piece.
Yes.
Yeah, this level of detail, conceptual level, is adequate enough for the zoning board.
Yeah, we don't often see even that.
Okay. Okay, I think that's all we had, right? Fire trucks, stormwater plan. Stormwater plan, is this something that's required as soon as you reach a certain,
Yeah, so in
number
our,
of units?
yeah, we'll have, in our, this will come before the board as a site plan application.
I see.
And within there, we have requirements to, treat stormwater, accept stormwater, treat it before releasing it on site.
Okay.
So, and that's pretty standard practice in all communities.
And that, usually it's not for residential, it's for multi-units and commercial?
For multi-units and commercial.
I see.
Yep. And so when we say that the site plan application kicks in, if it was a single residence, then we wouldn't be doing a site plan, and the drainage components are not as important
Okay,
as they are when we're talking about parking lots for,
yeah,
16 cars, turning radiuses for fire trucks, et cetera. It just ends up being a lot more pavement impervious surface, and where if it's a undisturbed site right now, then you're adding in that impervious surface, which is just gonna increase runoff rates, and we just wanna make sure that anything going beyond the property is contained on the property.
I see, I see. So if I want to keep things simple for myself, I find a small piece of lot, that a land of 4 acres, which is the minimum for a duplex. And it's easier to put one duplex per lot in multiple places than one bigger project. Am I correct on this, based on the zoning rules that I read? A duplex is considered like a regular house?
Yep, I mean, the duplex is permitted in any zone, you can have it as long as it's, got the same minimum land.
Yeah, so it'd rather be better to find multiple pieces of land that are smaller, enough building area to respect the setbacks and all that stuff, and then do more.
But you as a owner or developer, that's within your purview of that threshold. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know, maybe 16 units is enough
Yeah,
to bear the cost of putting in a road and,
right.
larger well, et cetera.
Very good. I do,
All right.
thank you. Did you have more questions, Scott?
No,
or- Thank you, everyone.
Yep, thank you for
Appreciate
coming.
it. Learned a lot tonight.
Great, good luck.
Thank you.
And if you do have questions after this, Joanna's available. You can pass through some questions to her.
Does the zoning board have the same type of approach as the high-level guidance, non-binding type of meeting, or
They don't.
they are more formal?
Everything they do is binding. That's the way the zonings are set up.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is Colin Lentz from the RPC. He's going to do a little bit of discussion on increasing safety in 152. Probably has a little bit more information that he can share with us, but yeah. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
And welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for the invitation. Again, I'm Colin Lentz. I brought some cards to pass around as well. I'm the regional transportation planner at Stratford Regional Planning. So I work with the State Department of Transportation on highway safety improvement projects, and I'm currently part of the Highway Safety Improvement Program Committee. And they're all states have a specific set of guidelines and a sort of a mission, if you will, to improve safety on all roads in the state. They follow a driving towards zero policy, and most recently, federal regulations require states and metropolitan planning organizations to set performance targets, one of which is safety. So improving safety and showing a return on investment, basically. So one of the ways that the state does that is through the road safety audit program, and that's what I came here to speak on specifically. So if you're familiar with the 10-year plan process, we solicit projects from communities. Those go at the end of that 10-year plan. This is on an annual basis. So these projects through the road safety audits are separate from the 10-year plan, but they receive HSIP funding, Highway Safety Improvement Program funding, that gets listed with the other projects. So you don't have to wait 10 years in this case. The road safety audit program, I handed out 3 sheets, one kind of with a longer description of the process, one with a shorter list of bullets that list the specific criteria. The few to keep in mind are, so this is sort of a targeted program for road segments and intersections that have a demonstrated history of including at least one fatal crash within a 10-year period. Also a serious injury crash, or a crash resulting in a serious injury or fatality. That intersection or segment can also, it needs to not have any work been done on it for the past 5 years to improve safety. So they're looking for infrastructure, primarily infrastructure-related accidents. So if someone drove off the road because they were intoxicated, that would not fall under this program. Mm-hmm. If someone hit someone else because of a visibility issue on a corner, so Y intersections are a specific concern for DOT because of the visibility challenges that happen with those, especially if you have a high-speed Y intersection. So the intersection that I identified based on our data related to fatalities was down here at the triangle. So I noticed one, but there may be data from the police locally that show more fatal crashes or serious injuries than we have. That happened recently with an application from Somersworth that was successful for this program, where the police had extra data that the state didn't and we didn't, and that just added to the strength of their application. So for a successful application, the state will work with the municipality, Department of Public Works, Public Safety, whoever wants to be part of the process, to come out physically and analyze and assess the road with a team of engineers, the intersection or the road segment, and come up with a selection of alternatives for improving safety at that intersection. So any questions thus far? So it's an annual program, and would potentially not cost the town a thing. It's not an 80-20 split like many other federal programs. So the official deadline for this program is December 1st every year. It's never a bad time to apply for the program, but at a recent meeting of the Highway Safety Improvement Program Committee, many of the applications they received were deemed ineligible because the data that came with them were incomplete or showed crashes in proximity to the area of question, but were not really directly related to the infrastructure. And so potentially, very potentially, they could have a second open round in the spring. So they would have another open round, people could apply and get funds for these road safety audits. That was the preliminary word from the safety section at DOT. I can't confirm that at this point or what time that would happen.
What you're saying is that even though it's past the December 1st
Yes.
deadline right now,
Yep.
it may not be too late to get in for this year.
Yeah, because they have, they have funding for safety projects every fiscal year, and they, somewhat like a budget, they want to, if they have $6 million to program, they want to program $6 million of projects for that year. And so Somersworth was one of the projects that was eligible, and there was another one in Rochester that they feel could be taken care of just through regular maintenance, like with a district, next time they stripe or pave the road in the Rochester's question. They're reviewing a couple of other ones, and then a handful, 3 or 4, were deemed that they were not appropriate for the road safety audit program because of data issues. So more funding is available than they anticipated.
And this
based on
could,
the applications.
and this qualify, state roads within the communities.
And local
qualify.
roads. And local roads.
Yeah, and local roads.
Doesn't,
Yes,
the
it doesn't have to
designation
be-
doesn't matter. They want to improve safety 100% on every single road in public road in the state. So driveways excluded. Any other questions on the program?
You mentioned the area of the Y up here, that intersection, which happens to be an area near and dear to my heart for concern, because I walk past it to come here into the library. Being there and getting even police information off of it would not actually tell a full story on it, because a lot of big trucks use other roads to come off of 156 rather than going this way if they're going to be heading heading east, because they can't make that turn. So you're not going to find that there's going to be that bigger risk, because they'll continue on going west, but they won't take it to go east.
Okay, well, so that can be communicated, that kind of information can be communicated through me. So I worked personally with Somersworth and DOT folks to provide information about their application. So I speak directly to the people that manage this program. So they want to make sure that their funding is targeting areas with a demonstrated safety hazard that can be shown with fatalities and serious injuries. Unfortunately, it's a reactionary program, but that's just the nature of the game at this point. But we can also include information about freight issues like that, where the trucks are exacerbating that issue, and potentially causing more of a safety hazard.
Or there may be an accident that's distance away that looks like it's not the same intersection, but the only reason it occurred there was because it was avoiding.
Yes,
Yeah, I don't know if that would.
yeah.
Well, and they're using the smaller roads that we have in town, like Church Street, to get past, because they can't make that sharp.
Yeah, and that has been the challenge that I've seen for smaller communities applying to this program, is lack of data to back up these. Somersworth has a policy where they record every single thing that happens with a police officer related to traffic, even if it's just people bumped at a red light, and they called the police just to make sure that everything was by the book, all the way up to a fatality. I'm not sure if the police department was able to provide any data or records for crashes.
They did. It
It's
was
supposed to
a
be
little bit of short notice.
Yep.
So I got what I think is limited data. But this is the first part of this year, January 1st to January 23rd. And every accident is listed. Not all the details are on these sheets. I'm sure it's probably available. And out of these 6 sheets, I only see 1 fatality, and it doesn't even tell me, it just tells me it's Stage Road. So the details aren't here. And again, I just kind of asked, I think it was Monday, and wasn't able to get through till Tuesday, so very kind of last minute information. But, some of them do have Stage Road and an address, and list several vehicles, some detail. So I'm sure we can get probably quite a bit of detail.
Yeah, and so that would be the critical piece, is being able to provide a picture of what the safety hazard is. For the Somersworth and for the Rochester one applications, I worked with staff at our office to put together a crash diagram based on the police records that we had available, where I actually diagrammed what kinds of accidents were happening at what point, at what location of the intersection, and so what were the contributing factors. Whether it was speed, we'd like to provide time of day, conditions, people involved, as much detail as we can, so that DOT can put together an accurate picture of what the situation, and come up with the most effective and cost-effective response to the situation.
So, Colin, do they factor in at all the pedestrian use of the road? I mean, we have several areas along, especially this section, and down in front of the library, where there's pedestrians crossing the street to get access to either trails or other community buildings. Do they take that into consideration? Definitely.
The mandate is for all users of the transportation system, and non-motorized users are called out. I'm trying to remember a road safety audit project that came up recently where a cyclist was killed along the shoulder, and so that was one of the major factors in that. So, short answer is yes.
But are you then saying that still that someone has to be killed walking or cycling before something is done, even though we can demonstrate that there is no pedestrian right-of-way on these roads, except for soft shoulder, which goes into poison ivy and ditches?
Through
And walking with it, when you've got a stroller or other young children, and we have 2 daycares that use this road, they actually walk through my property, and we allow them to, so that they can avoid sections of the road, because there's no place for them to be.
Through this program, unfortunately, yes, it is reacting to data-based demonstrations of safety hazards for fatalities and serious injuries. There is the Transportation Alternatives Program, which specifically is for non-motorized transportation. So increasing a shoulder, creating a side trail if possible. And that's a separate program. I'm happy to talk about that if you'd like. But the Road Safety Audit Program and Highway Safety Improvement Program are, it's a tricky business, safety, where 90% of accidents are caused by human error. And it's really surprisingly difficult to show a causation between an engineered solution and an improvement in safety. And that's part of the reason for the 5-year delay between when a road is worked on to improve safety and when it's eligible for this program. In some cases are pretty clear cut, with improving visibility, and technology is helping with that. But this program, just by the nature of the issue, is reactionary.
So, go ahead. Well, I'd be interested in learning a little bit more about the transportation alternative
Mm-hmm.
program to see if that one would be a better fit for what
Okay.
a lot of the concerns are.
Before we jump onto that one
Yeah.
though, Colin, could you just explain, kind of what the result of the road safety audit is, or product,
Yes.
and the benefit of that?
Yes, so, as I said, DOT, a crew comes out, and just to back up a little bit, they're sort of broadening the work they do, and they're calling it a safety section at DOT, which includes planners, engineers, and taking sort of a broader look at safety. So they would come out with engineers and planners and work with the community. And I think the bullets actually, there are different levels depending on what the community wishes and how detailed the problem is. But they come out and work personally with the community, and then go back and come up with some potential alternative solutions to the problem. And through many steps of this process, it requires community support and sign-off and review. So this is driven by the community. I'm here for technical assistance, but it's the community's decision, and DOT wants it to be a collaborative process. So they come up with engineered drawings, and then the final product it goes to construction.
So,
Usual process.
and you get a better preference if you have a road safety audit done, right? I mean, it kind of sets the stage of getting, ultimately, implement those safety
So
components to it.
it is, you'll have to forgive me, I've only helped with the 2 applications and haven't seen one completed all the way, but it's a complete package. So the application and acceptance of that application comes with the engineering audit, the selection of alternatives, and the implementation of the selected alternative. So it's all one contained process, from conception of the problem, conception of solutions, to on-the-ground construction. If that was your question.
Yeah, I guess I was, my experience has been that you've got it, you have to go through a couple of different funding mechanisms. But is this all under one?
Yes.
So the construction would be part of,
Correct.
okay.
Yeah, so it's not like a planning study where, okay, we fund the planning study, now how do we fund the solutions that it came up with?
Exactly, yeah.
Start to finish.
Okay, good, thank you.
You said this is good for, state roads, but it can also be used for local roads?
Yes, unnumbered local public roads. So, one of the more recent ones was rumble strips on Wakefield, or up through on 16 after it stops being the Spalding Turnpike through Wakefield. So they had a lot of crossing the center line head-on collisions, and rumble strips have completely taken care of that problem. Now they have noise complaints about the rumble strips, but that's a different thing. So they're really good at coming up with really highly effective cost-effective solutions.
And, so I know 152 is always a concern in town. I think that's already in a 10-year plan for the two intersections, right, I believe? The one at Route 4.
The Route 4.
I thought this one
Right,
was, yeah, this one's
and I
not.
believe this one
Yes,
here.
the Route 4 and 152 intersection is in the draft 10-year plan, and I would be immensely surprised if that was touched by the legislature. That project, also DOT is going to be using part of that money to do sort of a corridor level study, including that intersection. So there'll be work done before 2028, I think is the year that it's slated for the plan.
And for- oh, I'm sorry.
No, that was it.
And for non-state road projects that are approved, and the funding is granted, for like a town like us, we tend to do our own reconstruction projects.
Okay.
Our road agents, road crew, for the most part. I don't know if that's changing with the retirement of the road agent or not, but some are engineered out. I don't know if we ever subcontract out, but
Yeah.
do we get locked in? Does it kind of bind your hands to, like, or do they give you like, they engineer it, they give you the pool of money, and you spend it, or do you have to kind of subcontract it out to someone to get the work done?
I don't know for sure that part, since I haven't seen personally a project from start to finish. I feel like they're fairly flexible on that end. I don't think they have a team that they require you to use for the construction, but I don't know for sure.
And then for the application itself, is that usually done by town administrator?
It can depend. They just they want a demonstration of the town's desire and commitment to a project into the application. So you'll see there's a signature for a town official, usually the administrator, and the district engineer, and then our executive director, Cynthia, is usually the signer for SRPC. So as I said, I communicated with the local police in Somersworth, as well as planning and engineering staff to make, and the city manager, just to make sure everyone was on board, and that's really all they want to see for the application.
Now, the roads in Somersworth and Rochester that you just talked about, are they town roads or are they state roads?
That one is a state road on 125. The Somersworth intersection is, those are local roads. So
And you don't know who's gonna actually do the project? It hasn't got to the point of who's gonna actually do the work for the project?
correct, those were applications that were accepted on the December 1st deadline, so that's very early in the process.
I'm gonna go off topic for a second, I'm just curious about it. The driveway permit process for the state, seems, I've never seen one denied that we've approved, a lot or whatever, but looking back at some of those, it may have been, in safety issues. So, for example, as you go Route 4, if you were to take 152 to Route 4 and head east, right after you crest the hill, and on the left side, Mary Hill is there.
Okay.
And right after you crest the hill, it's a double lane going west, but there's driveways immediately there. And
Right.
If the school bus stops heading west there in the morning, so traffic on the right stops, but you've just crested the hill, so traffic behind you is going 55.
And you mentioned one of the
Seems like a-
local roads that's fairly new, I think, that goes into a residential development that I remember talking with Mr. Sterndale about, where, I mean, you're right, so Route 4 is a concern for similar reasons for Nottingham and Northwood and Barrington for that reason, where it's a high-volume road that has become more residentially dense, and so you face problems when you have you come into conflict with lots of turning movements in a high volume. It's a commuter route basically, and then at night, it's a freight route. So I don't know if I answered your actual
Yeah, I just
question.
didn't know, like, what the process was for how often that's revised or revisited, and, because I know there's been questions about, people have talked about speed limits on 4, and maybe they need to be revised down at this point, because of that,
That's a good question
It's in our master plan.
that I can investigate.
I was pulling it from somewhere.
But related to that, I want to note that the draft 10-year plan also includes $700,000 per year for corridor studies throughout the region. So we'll be working with the Department of Transportation on how those corridors are ranked and selected for funding. But Route 4 has been at the top of our list that we've submitted to DOT based on local input for a corridor study. I would say Route 4 and 125 are kind of the top two in this region for needing a corridor level study. And so that's basically from the Epping Circle all the way to I'm not sure there's really a limit that we've talked about for Route 4 headed west. But that would come up, that would definitely be a part of a corridor study, is turning movements, development trends and so forth.
In our discussions, on the 10-year plan, mainly Northwood, Barrington, and of course I was involved too, were talking about that whole corridor plan, so, yeah.
Yeah, because the region continues to grow
Rapidly.
more rapidly than any other in the state, so.
As far as 152 goes with regards to the changes, any changes being made at all, what about you mentioned, we were talking about for pedestrians and the lack of shoulders, if you will, for any of us. What about changing the lines when they're painted to at least allow for something that way? Does that fall under the transportation alternatives, or would that be part of the road safety audit?
That, so pedestrian considerations would definitely be considered through a road safety audit. That could also just be taken care of the next time the lines are painted. And that would be done through, with the district, kind of in coordination with DOT in that way. But if it's widening the shoulders, that would be considered through a road safety audit along with that. You know, they don't want to just address the one fatality that happened if it didn't, you know, include pedestrians. If we can accomplish multiple safety goals with one project, then that's definitely a goal.
And that could fall under a transportation alternatives program too.
Certainly,
Yeah.
yes.
Well, that's
So
what I was wondering.
You
Yeah.
kind of have three options.
Try to get something done sooner rather than later.
Do you know, is there a general, status with DOT that when they're repaving state routes that happen to go through a municipality or through a town center, are they, if they're not automatically widening, that they're relining them to allow for bike and pedestrian access?
Unless you ask them.
You have to ask.
Yeah, you have to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna be working on it this summer.
Well, and I put through a call a year ago. So,
Yeah, and that's something that we've talked about, wanting to make sure that they do when they do come back and shim and overlay and repaint.
but how do we accomplish getting that done? Like I said, I put through the call a year ago.
So,
started
yeah, I mean,
Transportation issue.
yeah, I mean, I can make a couple
So,
calls.
yeah,
Make sure
I
that-
wonder if Colin might even have a way to help us with that,
Yeah,
to,
I don't know for sure. Are you guys in District 6?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was District 6. So, I can give a call to those guys. And I'm not sure if there's an official paperwork process that needs to be done with that, or if it's just because they have, a repaving schedule and maps and so forth. So I will definitely give them a call and ask what officially can be done or what needs to be done unofficially to make sure that, when they're looking at their maps, that there's specific parameters for
Yeah, and
moving the fog line.
what I've worked in the past, it's basically a letter from the town to the district requesting it. And that's kind of what really makes it formal.
And who, as far as town is that the Board of
Select board?
Selectmen?
Yeah, it
Is
would be
the
the.
town
it would be the select board.
administrator? or
Yeah, it would be the select board.
Select board, okay.
But it would come out of our recommendations, right? So we as a planning board would, because it's a good idea, and we'd like to take credit for it.
Rightfully so.
What we've been talking about.
Are you talking about a letter? Talking about a letter to the selectmen requesting that they send a letter?
Well, you can sign on the
So,
letter too.
Yeah, we could sign on a letter.
Yeah, the more the merrier.
All it takes is a letter. But the Transportation Alternative Program has much less funding available, if I'm correct, than it used to.
It is more competitive, I would think, just based on the timing of that. So the road safety audit, everyone at DOT says RSA, just to confuse everyone to think they're talking about the state RSAs. The road safety audit program is annual. The Transportation Alternatives Program, that is tied to federal funding that is less
Predictable?
is less predictable, more open to being just gutted. So DOT, I believe, has funding for 2 more transportation alternatives program rounds. The closest one would be, if they follow the same schedule they did for the past 2 rounds, applications would be due in the spring. And in that case, the regional planning commissions provide a regional scoring process that amounts for about 6% of DOT's eventual decision. The communities that applied for it in the past round, all 3 of them had very excellent applications and were successful. UNH, Somersworth, and Dover. And so that process is more rigorous. The criteria for projects would be a little more up in the air, so we wouldn't know the full application process until it comes time to apply. And it is much more competitive because you've got all sorts of projects competing for that, protected bike lanes. There's a rec trails component of that goes to, for rec trail development, pedestrian bridges, sidewalks, shoulders, you name it. Anything non-motorized, for sake of argument, is eligible for that program. So much more competitive. That is an 80% federal, 20% local program. It's actually a reimbursement program, so the community would pay 100% upfront and get reimbursed 80%. And that has, they want to see financial viability in the application so that the community has the funds set aside, ready to go.
With federal money, there's strings attached. There's a lot of strings attached.
And there are fewer with the safety program, because that's a clear-cut mandate for them that they want to see that going down.
Did I understand you correctly that if a safety audit identifies a problem and fixes the problem, that part of that plan can be to add some safety structure that isn't exactly in the audit? In other words, if the center of town, if this intersection was picked out as something that had to be reconfigured, could pedestrian pass and bike pass in that area be part of that project?
I would not expect a protected bike lane to be part of that. I can't say that for sure. The audit process takes into the safety needs overall. So I think a protected bike lane is gonna be much more expensive and less viable than extending the shoulder and moving the fog line and creating some better signage and engineering it so that it slows down the cars and raises awareness of the pedestrians. That is far more likely. But non-motorized considerations would be taken into account. I'm confident of that.
So assuming, let's say we qualified for the road safety audit, and there was one specific intersection that needed reconfiguration, okay, and that was where the concentration was. However, in that audit, we would also get information as to how to improve the safety possibly on, well, the whole area we're looking at. I mean, with that, am I assuming that correctly? So we'll not only get maybe one problem area fixed, but we would also get the information on how, at least how to fix the other safety problems. Does that make sense?
That's a good question. The recommendations and engineering are gonna be in direct proximity to where the demonstrated safety hazard is. If there is, for lack of a better word, an anecdotal pedestrian safety issue that is nearby but not in direct proximity, that could be taken into account. But the the funds in this program are dedicated to, directly addressing a demonstrated safety problem. So I can't say how flexible they are in terms of extending that audit and the funds related to that to improve a non, data-driven problem. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, what it could be is that it's just non-participated, and
Right.
the community, if it's important, would then pay for outside those boundaries of the RSA.
So, I'm happy to ask this of them, but I can ask if the audit could include recommendations for improvements related to pedestrians, but as you said, the actual funding for the construction would just be the near proximity to the
core primary.
core primary area. So that, I'm happy to ask about that, and they want to improve safety, so. I know of that bicycle-related, the one I mentioned, and I'm totally failing to remember where it was. It's over sort of in central, southwestern part of New Hampshire, and that was quite a long stretch, including a sort of weird oblong triangle intersection near a high volume recreational ski site, and so there were grade issues where cars would speed up. There were a bad braking zone, and so it included that entire corridor because of the related traffic issue and the place where the cyclist was killed. So they take a long view, and they, as I said, they have a special concern for Y intersections, and if you have, a triangle is essentially 3 Y intersections, that they'll broaden the scope. So I can ask about kind of the flexibility related to that.
Great, no, this is good information, appreciate it.
Not a problem. I've been trying to get the word out because, we just generated a map with fatalities within the past year, and it's pretty red with little dots all over the place. And so, the money, they want to fix these problems.
I had a cousin who was killed on Route 4 in Barrington, just checking his mail. And having gone through that and then walking this road with cars going much faster than the posted speed limit, and having my grandson with me, it really is something that's a priority for me, and I would hate to have to be a fatality before something gets done to make our roads safer.
And that's something I've asked about a few times, is how I've been trying to think of how do you predict where the safety hazards are really going to be, and validate spending funds where you haven't had a fatality yet, but anyone who's ever driven there or walked there or has experienced an intersection of, would say this is extremely dangerous and it's only a matter of time. So how do you find the ones where it's only a matter of time? And that's really a huge, kind of a sticky challenge. And it's even hard to take an intersection in the past which had a demonstrated safety hazard, where they put in, an engineered solution and then looked at the data long-term. Even those are fairly inconclusive, because it's still a human being driving the car, texting, long day at work. Who knows? Who knows what human factors cause it? So it's sadly a difficult issue to engineer solutions for.
Understood.
What about, maybe Derek can answer this, but since you're here, I'll ask. So what jurisdiction does the town have to try to implement changes if it's a town road, and if it's a state road? So I think there was a discussion once about trying to put a crosswalk between the library and the the old town hall across the street from the library. There's now a daycare that's subletting that, I believe. So obviously, you expect to see traffic. It's also right at that Y intersection in the corner that's there. So I think we weren't allowed to paint an intersection because it's not our road. I could be wrong. I remember discussion around it, and I don't know, you know, do you have to wait for the state to go through and approve it and everything, or do towns have some, you know, leeway to kind of go through and make a fix
That,
if they self-fund it?
that what I would have to ask about. DOT would not say no to the town contributing funds, certainly. And for a smaller project like striping and signage and an improved visibility, that certainly wouldn't require a 10-year plan scale project. I have a feeling something could be worked out between the community and the district and, you know, the state folks. I know Wakefield had a similar up by, if you guys know where the Wakefield Inn is and the little congregational church. They had a similar issue where they have, you know, Sunday traffic is substantial, and when I was visiting that site, just visually it was easy to clock people at 50 miles an hour on that street, just in front of the Wakefield Inn. So they worked with DOT to paint a crosswalk there. And I think discussed other you know, temporary measures for when church was, when folks were there for church. So, without me babbling anymore, I think something could be worked out between the state and the municipality to get something like that done, even though it's a state road, especially when it's safety concerned. So I can ask about kind of those short-term, low-cost measures as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Ed, you were right on, that we had been told, you know, because part of the Friends of the Library, and they have oftentimes functions across the way, and they said that it was not able to happen again unless we were able to get some police support because it was too dangerous for crossing.
It's a tough spot because, again, the wire intersection, but then you have the curve with a house right on the corner on the blind curve. So,
Yeah.
so the line of sight is poor.
And
to say the
that's,
least.
and that's a case where the use of the buildings, you know, can change. For instance, that the old town hall recently started, you know, has a new use, fairly new use, and so the traffic and pedestrian pattern is different.
Well, great, Colin, I appreciate it.
Thank
Any
you
other-
so much.
Not a problem. Any other questions? I'll leave my cards down here at the end of the table, and Gary knows how to get in touch with me, so
Great.
happy to help on anything.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it,
Thanks a
Colin.
lot for the presentation.
Next on the agenda.
Thanks, Colin.
I think we just have minutes. We've decided to postpone the transportation subcommittee for this evening. We have 2 members that are missing and 1 that was not notified. So when we were talking about scheduling it for this day, I didn't realize that Mike Russo wasn't in attendance, so he wasn't
Good night.
invited. So I think we'll postpone that to another day.
Okay.
I'll reach out to the committee members and try and find a day that's works best.
And I think Mike is up to this and grading, so he probably wouldn't have been able to come anyways.
That's true, yeah, finals, midterms.
Okay, so the last thing on the agenda is minutes, is that right?
Well,
Dates?
didn't we want to look at projects
Is
or no?
that on the agenda?
I didn't put it on the agenda.
Then no. I'm just kidding. We can look at projects.
Well, Sue sent out a comment on it in her email message.
And these
statement.
are like action items for us to do? Is that what you're saying?
Well, she just said, there would be no dark sky presentation. They've reached out multiple times, so.
And they haven't been
and they
able to
haven't
get a
been
hold
able-
of them.
Yeah,
Okay.
so she's not sure that that should be maintained on the list as important at this point. Though it's still important, there's not much of anything that can move forward with it. And that her top pick was road safety.
Well, we got that done.
Pardon me?
Road safety?
Joanna, the top two there, that were you and Paul.
It's all you.
Yeah,
No, this is what we had last year, you guys asked for
Right.
that, I didn't doctor it.
are those making any kind of headway, or should those be switched to us for anything, or?
I don't have that in front
Oh,
of me.
so there was two items, update floodplain section of the ZO and implementation of GIS use for the town.
I know the GIS one, I talked with Paul when he was here about trying to get at least there's a lot of GIS information available that we could use if the town had the capabilities of, a GIS program, which we don't.
Which I think we will begin next
Okay.
year. I think it's in the budget.
Okay. And so, that asset management is a good piece, that could be used for GIS.
Forget what one Chris said we were getting.
It's probably ArcInfo, which is primary type.
So I know there's a lot, so I know I've seen some on now, the tax maps online, or when you go through the assessor's page, there's some layers showing they're not necessarily as up to date as if you go to just Granite view. That one seems to be more readily updated, but for individual town stuff.
Yeah, when we talked about having, kind of road inventory, I know, I don't know how far that went, before our road agent retired, whether we have, a road assessment.
Yeah, there's some work that was already put into it, and I think that's one of the reasons why I want to get that GIS is to get those roads, because kind of what they've been doing right now is just kind of trying to do it with free software, which just isn't cutting the mustard. So, so that was one of the reasons why to get the GIS system, was to get those roads properly mapped and,
Yeah, and a lot of that is data that's available. We don't have to go out and survey or collect it. RPC has a lot of that data.
right.
Our aquifer data, our wetland data, a lot of that stuff's already available. We could just use those layers, for whatever purpose we
Right.
want.
And has Chris gotten a hold of you yet too? Because there's a dollar value put into the planning budget for like planning resources if
I haven't seen the
board
planning budget.
wants it, so I want to say it was around 10 or 15,000.
That's normally what we carry.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's usually for outsourcing, like a Jack Meddy or
Jack
something like
Meddy,
that.
yeah. I think it's about that same amount. I'm not remembering off the top of my head. But Chris was gonna reach out to you and just get your,
Okay.
like, okay, that looks good on it.
And isn't that something us as a board, when we're gonna need to approve that budget amount? That's,
Typically, we do. I mean,
Probably should review it.
We all look at it, review it, and then, we're getting late in that process, right?
Yeah, we're
And
not,
Usually Paul brings it forward.
Yeah,
we're
and
we're
we-
near the final of it. Are you you're not in the office tomorrow, are you? Could you ask Chris to, or, could you get that from Chris and send it out, the planning budget? And send it to the board? I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, because obviously now, without Paul here, we have to be cognizant of having to outsource potentially, major subdivision
stuff.
plans, things like that.
Well, that's all gonna be, applicant paid, the majority of
If we
it.
outsource the initial review.
It should be, yeah. Yeah, we should, any, reviews we would outsource would be the applicant's cost.
We have to just review it in our process.
But yeah, there are things that
When we
we.
send it out.
Yep,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we may need some of that support, which we could lean on, and I talked to Chris about that. I mean, that's what RPC is somewhat set up for. They can provide some of those, planning board support features, but there's a cost to them. Yeah, because, I mean, we're doing some things on this, off-site improvement roads, creating additional scenic roads, safe roads, bike signs. I mean, we are accomplishing, I think, some of these, not as quick as we'd like. So the transportation subcommittee will continue, addressing these.
So is the plan to, are we looking at this kind of to see if we want to do, kind of stay with this list on 2018, or to look at,
Sounds
do we
like
want to
it.
shift some of this around?
I mean, it sounds like you guys have the GIS kind of, underhand, so we can take that off of this list. Right?
Right.
It's kind of POS.
And
Great, we shifted.
Well, it's really town administrator is really doing it.
lower order streams and wetlands. So go on.
That says conscom.
Okay, that's not us. And then it has been discussed of, you know, are we gonna take up this master plan revisions? That's probably the big consideration, whether that starts to get into a committee. Dimensional standards for multifamily housing, too restrictive.
Question mark.
Gravel pits, rezoning, term of residential is.
Excavation requirements? Gravel
For
pits?
gravel pits.
I don't remember that discussion on the gravel pits.
I don't know if there was ever, I don't either. I don't know if there was a discussion or if it just came out of something that was identified in the master plan. It was like a,
Okay.
That came out of this thing came out of a vote last
Yeah, I
year.
remember
Right, but I
that.
don't remember
Yeah.
the gravel pits part of it.
It was a poll that we took.
But
So what about, the last one? I think this master planning, to take that on, we'd probably have a larger discussion on it, than just kind of selecting a couple items tonight.
Yeah.
So, this last one discussing detached ADUs.
Well, I think we put that one on hold too, because at the state level, they keep,
Yeah,
and I think that there's some bills in there again this year too.
okay, so let's just scratch that one off, because
do
it's.
we have someone on this committee at all that looks at, or any way for this committee to find out what the state is doing for
Well,
legislative updates?
is one of those emails that you send out, is it legislation stuff? You send us the one from the Stratford
Yeah.
NHMA.
Okay,
Yeah, those usually have the information in there.
all right. I must have missed that recently.
I send it frequently, but, if you want, do you want me to retitle it so that you guys kind of have a new subject?
Or even if you just put legislative info on it,
Okay,
that would be helpful for me.
okay.
Yeah, I think the ADUs, the detached idea was something that, I just find it kind of ludicrous that we have what's considered ADUs that are attached by fences, and I know it's illegal, it's accepted legally,
It worked for me.
but
we're not supposed to in our subdivision regs or our section zoning about ADUs. They're supposed to have a
Yeah,
common
shared
door.
common door.
yeah.
So that maybe that some of those went through before that was done, or they were never permitted.
I think Portsmouth is the driver behind what's going on at the state level, I think, for ADUs.
But I remember it was revised. I remember Paul making those, examples of, people would put a pergola or some like long arbor that went between
Right,
that.
because somebody
To make it
won a
attached.
court case.
So then
Yeah, right.
they were revised.
It's accepted,
revised.
yeah.
So currently we still have a common door, I believe.
I don't think this one should come off, the ADU should totally come off.
Okay.
Don't- I mean, keep it as a, on the back burner type thing still for.
Yeah, maybe it's just, maybe it's not as important.
Well, I think that's why it's labeled as research, the uses for a year or two,
Okay, got it. Signed.
so that it stays on there, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
So, did I hear correctly, we're striking the implementing GIS because that's basically been done?
Board of Selectmen's doing it.
Okay. But everything else is staying on as is,
Dark sky's coming off.
dark skies
Right.
as well.
In all honesty, why I would really, really love to have a dark sky ordinance, and I think it's really, really important. Everybody around us does not.
Well, maybe we just, look at it as part of the master planning.
And so we're gonna have this little black, and then all around us, it's just
You can actually,
lit up like.
since we have a lot of recreation here, which can draw people into town, like Pawtucket and everything like that, that can actually become like a part of eco, like destination thing, is that the town has dark sky, and so sometimes that draws people in too, draws residents and visitors.
Well, I know when, I think it was 2 years ago that some of the planning board members went to meet with Raymond, and Sue was one of them, and I asked her to ask Raymond about their dark sky, if they have one, and like, would they consider something like a regional impact? Because like, if we had a dark sky ordinance, and so it's a regional impact, right? She said they said, like, just like ignored her question. It's like,
And I think a large part of that is because so much, and even Epping now with all of the shopping centers and stuff,
Hannaford.
there's so much
well,
light.
when I lived on the lake, you'd have Raymond lights, and then when I moved to Gowan Road, it was much darker than when we lived on the lake, until they built the bank up at the corner. Because for whatever reason, the town of Northwood allowed the bank different lighting than they required Hannaford and Irving and stuff, because when Hannaford and Irving was built, they had pretty, stricter level of lights and stuff, but once the bank, the sky lit up again.
Wow.
So we lost actually some of the, but just that much of that's not much of a difference, in distance, where we could see many more stars than when we lived on the lake.
Okay, so let's wrap this up.
Just tell me to stop my storytelling.
Stop your storytelling. Isn't that what I said? Let's wrap it up.
Would you like
Nice way.
a motion to approve the minutes?
Yes, I would.
I move to approve the minutes for January 10th, 2018 as it's been amended.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Those in favor, indicate aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
I move we adjourn.
Do we want to do updates first? Do we have any updates?
Oh,
Any updates?
We're working on the budget, and we'll probably be doing a bond for roads.
All right, free form updates. Just jump in.
I don't have any.
no.
Nothing here.
Okay. I have a new town and country, but that's not really that interesting. Go ahead.
I move we adjourn.
I'll second.
Motion to adjourn? Approved.
Aye.